Hi, I'm Alara Whitlock. The night my father screamed, "You're the dirt under your sister's feet. Get out!" My mother slipped her the mansion keys like she was royalty. Everyone laughed, except me. I stood there, silent, while something inside me cracked open. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of truth, waiting to surface. A week later, a stranger whispered, "Your great-grandfather left it all to you." 97 million. The estate. Everything. And now I can't stop wondering, did I inherit his fortune or his enemies? Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from right now? And have you ever been betrayed by your own family? They didn't invite me, but they expected me. The Whitlock Gala had always been a stage, a parade of wealth, polished smiles, and carefully curated family pride. As I stepped onto the gravel path leading to the estate, heels crunching softly, I felt like an intruder on land that had my blood in its bricks. The house loomed above, wrapped in ivy and old secrets. Its windows glowed warm and golden, but none of that warmth belonged to me. Inside, laughter fluttered through the halls like champagne bubbles. Light, expensive, disconnected from anything real. I walked through the foyer, passing polished portraits of ancestors who stared down as if weighing my worth. My dress was simple, navy, modest. It didn't shimmer like silk or cling like money. It didn't speak of inheritance, just survival. Corinne was the star, always had been, and tonight she played her part with the grace of someone who never had to earn a thing. Her gown was gold, slinking over her like it belonged there. People moved toward her like moths to light. She knew how to tilt her head, just enough to appear humble, while soaking in admiration like sunlight. I tried not to be in the way, kept my shoulders back, held my glass steady. I knew the rhythm of these nights: say less, smile more, vanish when necessary. But when I approached Dad, Lowell Whitlock, in his usual navy tux, bourbon in hand, that commanding posture that always made me feel 14. Something in me hoped for civility, maybe even decency, just this once. "Dad," I said, soft but steady, "I just wanted to say, congratulations. Corinne worked hard on all this. It's beautiful." He didn't even blink. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink, eyes flicking over me like I was lint. Then, loudly enough to cut through the music and the conversations, "You're the dirt under your sister's feet. Get out!" The words didn't just hit me, they hit the entire room. Conversations stalled mid-laugh. Glasses paused mid-air. Somewhere near the bar, someone actually gasped. I didn't speak, I didn't cry, I didn't give them that. My fingers curled slightly around the napkin I was holding, white linen, soft, with golden embroidery in the corner, C.W. Corinne's initials. I tucked it into my clutch without thinking. One day I might need to remember this moment exactly. I turned and walked. That simple, no one stopped me, not even Corinne, who was busy pretending this kind of scene was normal. Maybe it was. Maybe I was the only one pretending it wasn't. As I reached the grand staircase, I heard my mother's voice behind me, crisp, calm, calculated. She was holding something small and shiny. I paused on instinct and turned my head just slightly. She didn't even look at me. Her focus was on Corinne, her expression one of absolute pride. "These are yours now," she said, handing Corinne the keys, the mansion's keys, like a queen bestowing a crown. The applause was quiet, unsure. Some guests clapped because that's what you do when you see a show and aren't sure how to react. Me? I kept walking. Outside, the air was cooler, biting softly against my cheeks. The estate's lights cast long shadows on the gravel, and the night buzzed faintly with crickets and distant traffic. I walked slower now, not because I wanted to stay, but because I needed to feel this moment, not just run from it. Memories began to rise without permission. Spelling bees I won that no one attended. Report cards filled with praise no one read. The piano recital where Corinne missed a note and still got flowers. They had always chosen her. Over and over again. I used to think it was bad timing or miscommunication. But tonight made it plain. It was intentional. All of it. At the edge of the property, near the parked cars, I paused. Took a breath. My reflection stared back from the car window. Face calm, lips closed, eyes, not defeated, but not whole either. "If I'm dirt," I whispered, voice barely breaking the silence. "Maybe I'll grow something from it." Then I heard it. "Miss Whitlock?" I turned slowly, half expecting to see a guest who got lost. But the man standing behind me wasn't part of the gala. Dark coat, gray hair, holding a folder against his chest like it mattered more than anything inside that party ever did. "Your great-grandfather left something for you." I didn't move at first. The air between us was still, just the two of us at the edge of a party that never wanted me. He wasn't flashy like the rest of them. No designer tux, no fake smile. Just a gray suit, worn like it had been through more honest days, and a steady gaze that didn't flinch. "I'm Thatcher," he said, voice low and even. "I worked with your great-grandfather, Silas Whitlock." The name pulled something up from deep inside me. A memory, maybe. Dusty sunbeams through a shed window, the smell of cedar and oil. Paint on old hands and gentle laughter when I messed up his favorite wrench with my red finger paint. Thatcher didn't rush. He looked at me the way someone looks at a person trying to hold themselves together. Not with pity. With patience. "He left something for you," he said again. My arms crossed instinctively. "You've got the wrong Whitlock. That man probably left Corinne the moon, too." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a small leather envelope. Deep brown, soft from age. It had the Whitlock family crest stamped in wax. My name was written across the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in 20 years. "Alara." I blinked. That wasn't a name used much anymore. Not by them, anyway. "Your great-grandfather," Thatcher continued, "was a man who watched more than he spoke. He believed in letting time sort people out, but he didn't believe in rewarding noise." I didn't want to take the envelope, and yet, my fingers reached. The wax cracked quietly as I broke the seal. Inside, one piece of paper, heavy, cream-colored. 3 lines. "Legacy belongs not to the loud, but to the kind. When they laugh, stay silent. Truth will speak for you." My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not tonight. I just stood there, letter in hand, the words buzzing in my chest, like a quiet drumbeat I didn't know I needed. "This can't be real," I muttered. "They would have said something. My parents, Corinne, they would have—" Thatcher cut in gently. "Sometimes silence hides greed. Sometimes people forget that paper and signatures can speak louder than family dinners and gala speeches." He paused, eyes searching mine. "You weren't supposed to know. Not yet." I looked toward the mansion, lights still glowing, laughter spilling from behind the doors. If I walked back in now, letter in hand, they'd call me crazy. They'd smile politely, usher me out, just like always. But Thatcher wasn't smiling. He slipped something else from his coat, a small iron key, old but strong. It looked handmade, heavy, the kind of key that opened something important. He dropped it into my palm. "You'll need this soon. Keep it close." There were initials etched into it. W.H. Whitlock Haven. Not the name of the mansion. Something else, a name I hadn't heard before. "What's Whitlock Haven?" I asked. But he was, already turning. "You'll find it," he said, "when the time's right." The gravel crunched softly under his steps as he walked away, fading into the dark just beyond the parked cars. I stood still, the key warm in my hand, the letter pressed to my chest. Memories of Silas swirled behind my eyes. The afternoons we spent in his workshop, how he called me the quiet one with calloused hands. How he let Corinne bring her friends, but always made time to teach me how things worked, how to fix, not flaunt. Maybe he saw through all of it, long before I ever did. I looked back toward the estate one last time. I wasn't sure what had changed. Nothing on the outside had, but inside something small had shifted. A crack in the foundation. Not anger, not revenge, just space for something else. Thatcher's voice drifted back before he disappeared completely. They don't know I'm here yet, but they will. And then he was gone. I walked to my car and got in slowly. Started the engine, headlights washing over the driveway like a fresh start. Halfway home, I realized I hadn't even looked at my phone. I pulled over on the shoulder just before the old iron bridge. Checked the rearview mirror. Headlights, too close. I waited. The car behind didn't pass. It waited too. I didn't wait to see if the car would move. I just pulled back onto the road and drove the rest of the way home without music, without distractions. My thoughts were loud enough. The key Thatcher gave me sat in the passenger seat, glinting in the light every time I passed under a street lamp. It felt heavier than it should have. When I got to my apartment downtown, I parked a block away like I always did. No private driveway, just parallel spots and cracked sidewalks. I glanced back. No headlights. Still, I didn't rush. I walked up the creaky steps, unlocked the front door, and paused before turning on the lights. Everything was just how I'd left it. Quiet, full of things I loved but had stopped paying attention to. My paintings lined the walls, half-finished canvases propped against the bookshelves. The scent of old paper and acrylic paint lingered in the air. This was my world, even if it never felt big enough to matter. I fed Theo, my cat, who greeted me with a slow blink and a flick of his tail, like he knew I needed the calm. Then I made coffee, though I didn't really want it. It was just something to do with my hands. Morning came too fast. I hadn't slept much. I kept replaying the gala in my head, the looks, the laughter, my father's voice echoing like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. "You're the dirt under your sister's feet." It wasn't even the cruelty that hurt most. It was how easy it had been for him to say it, like he'd been holding on to it for years. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, and reread Silas's letter, again and again. I ran my thumb along the faded ink, tracing the curves of each word as if they might change. Legacy belongs not to the loud, but to the kind. When they laugh, stay silent. Truth will speak for you. That word, legacy, still didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed, fragile, like I'd drop it if I held it too tightly. But it was there, staring back at me in ink I recognized from childhood thank you cards Silas used to write. I got up to distract myself and started tidying my shelves, mostly dusting, straightening the books I hadn't touched in months. When I reached the far corner, a picture frame was slightly off. Odd. I never left things crooked. I reached to adjust it, and the backing shifted under my fingers. Curious, I pulled it off. Behind it, folded so tightly it looked like it had been pressed flat for years, was a piece of old paper. I didn't breathe as I unfolded it. The edges were dry and yellowed. The writing, unmistakable. Silas's will, not a copy, the original draft, my name at the top. To Alara Whitlock, I leave the estate known as Whitlock Haven, along with all associated accounts, properties, and holdings. It was clear, unedited, no strike-throughs, no additions. My name was right there, but this had never been filed. Or maybe it had. Maybe someone just made sure I never saw it. Someone had gone to real lengths to hide this. I held it with both hands, trying not to let it shake. But my body betrayed me. My fingers trembled, and something hot burned behind my eyes. Not tears. Not yet. They buried the truth, I whispered. Maybe it's time to dig it up. I paced the room, holding the document like it might disappear if I let go. So many things made sense now. The odd way Mom changed the subject every time Silas came up. Corinne's sudden interest in foundation work, how the family business pivoted overnight after Silas passed. I stepped out onto my tiny balcony for air, and that's when I saw it. Same black sedan from the night before, parked across the street, windows dark, engine off, just sitting there like it had nothing better to do. As soon as I turned my gaze toward it, the engine started. It pulled away, slow and deliberate. I didn't panic. I didn't run inside. I just watched. Now I knew. They were watching me. Because now I had something they didn't want me to have. I walked back in and laid the will flat on the table. The morning light poured through the window, landing right on my name. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not a big one, just enough to feel something shift inside me. Silas had seen me. Not the version my parents tried to ignore, not the background character they pushed to the side. He'd seen me, the builder, the quiet one, the one who stayed when everyone else needed an audience. I ran my fingers along the old paper again, folded it slowly, and slipped it back behind the photo frame where I'd found it. Until I knew what came next, it was safest there. "You kept your promise, didn't you, Silas?" I whispered. Then my phone rang. I looked down at the screen. Corinne Whitlock. The name flashing across my phone screen made my stomach clench. It was like seeing a shadow crawl out from under a closed door, unwelcome and too familiar. I let it ring 3 full times before sliding my thumb across the screen. "Corinne," I said, my voice steady, but my hand was tight around the phone. "Oh, Ellie, you finally answered." Her voice was all sugar and daggers, smooth on the surface, but always carrying something sharp underneath. "You caused quite a scene last night. Dad's still trying to calm down." There it was, that name, Ellie, the version of me that fit neatly in the corner of their picture-perfect world. Smaller, softer, easily dismissed. I let the silence stretch a beat too long. "Well," I said, "I didn't realize showing up at a family event would require a script." She ignored that. "Look, we've all had time to cool off. I think it'd be best if you came by the estate. Mom's really upset. She's worried you'll, do something else to embarrass the family." I walked toward my small kitchen, grabbed a glass, and filled it halfway from the sink. "You mean like exist?" "Alara," she sighed, drawing my full name out like a mother scolding a child. "This doesn't have to be difficult. We just need to talk. All of us. Face to face." I took a sip of water, watching dust spin through a slant of afternoon light. "Some things are best left in the past," Corinne added, voice still smooth but now edged. "We wouldn't want you misplacing anything important." My fingers froze on the rim of the glass. There it was. She knew. She knew I had the letter. "You're talking about something specific?" I asked, careful to keep my tone light. A pause, then too quickly. "No, just saying. With everything going on, it's easy to lose track of things. Emotions, documents, people." A pulse thudded in my ears, but I made myself breathe evenly. "I'll come by," I said slowly. "But this time, I'm not coming alone." Silence on the other end. "You're bringing someone?" she asked. "That's right." Another beat. "Who?" "I guess you'll find out," I said, then ended the call before she could answer. I stood still in the center of my apartment for a long moment. The fridge hummed. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. I could almost hear my heartbeat ticking like a metronome in my ears. On the table, the folded will lay beside the embroidered napkin I'd taken from the gala. I picked up the napkin again, traced the CW stitched in gold. How fitting, I thought. The initials of the one who had everything handed to her, and the woman she tried to erase from the story. I set it gently beside the letter again. Truth, next to humiliation. This was the first time in a long while that I didn't feel like I was retreating. For years, I'd let my silence be mistaken for surrender. Maybe they even believed I had. Nothing worth fighting for. But this was different. I opened my phone and called Thatcher. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. "It's Ilara," I said after the tone. "They know. I don't know how, but they know. I'm going back there. I need to know what's next. Call me." I hung up and placed the phone face down, unsure if I wanted it to ring again. The air in the room had changed. It wasn't warm or cold, just heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm when everything hangs suspended, waiting. I looked out the window, searching for that same black sedan from the night before. Nothing there now, but the feeling lingered, the weight of being watched, measured, and maybe even hunted. I turned back to the table, running a finger along the edge of the old letter. The ink had faded in some places, but my name still stood out, handwritten with a careful kind of affection I never got from anyone else in that family. "You kept your promise, didn't you, Silas?" I whispered, almost to myself. "You saw what they wouldn't." My phone buzzed again. I flipped it over, expecting Thatcher. Unknown number. I hesitated before opening the message. "If you want to survive this, don't go to the estate alone." That was it. No name, no follow-up. I stared at the screen, unsure if I felt more threatened or warned. Then I read it again, slower this time. "If you want to survive this..." Not if you want to win. Not if you want to prove something. Survive. My breath caught in my throat, and for the first time all day, I felt cold. This wasn't just about a will, or money, or even legacy. This was about power, control, and fear. They weren't scared of me, not really. But they were terrified of what I knew, and what I might say. And now, someone else out there knew it too. I grabbed the letter, the napkin, and the iron key, wrapping them all carefully in a scarf from my coat rack. I tucked it deep into my bag, zipped it shut, and double-checked the locks on my door. Something had shifted, and I couldn't go back to pretending otherwise. The road to the estate hadn't changed much. The trees still arched overhead like they were holding their breath. Moss dangled from the oaks like time itself had forgotten how to let go. I kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other clenched in my lap. My fingers ached, but I didn't relax them. The closer I got, the tighter my chest felt. When the mansion came into view, I had to remind myself to breathe. That house. It looked the same as it did when I was 10, 12, 16, massive and beautiful and completely indifferent. Not a home, just a structure built on control, appearances, and carefully hidden truths. I pulled into the circular drive and parked by the fountain. The water was stagnant, tinted green. Leaves floated on the surface like time had layered its own opinions onto everything they once tried to preserve. It was fitting, really. What was once pride had become rot. And yet, the house still stood. I sat there for a moment, staring up at the windows. When I was younger, I used to press my face to the glass from the inside, watching guests arrive. Always watching, never invited. This time, I whispered, "I'm not waiting for anyone to let me in." The doors opened before I could knock. Of course they did. My mother stood in the doorway, dressed in muted gray, the kind of color that said grief without ever admitting guilt. Her lipstick was just a shade too bright, like it was compensating for the dullness in her eyes. "Ilara," she said, voice soft, practiced. "Thank you for coming, sweetheart." There were cameras. I noticed them right away. two men in dress shirts hovering by the side pillars, pretending to adjust lenses on their phones. Another stood just off the main staircase, holding a clipboard, whispering into a headset. This wasn't a reunion, this was a production. "We just want to move on," my mother said sweetly, glancing toward the cameras. "It's time the family came together again. Enough misunderstandings." I didn't answer, just stepped inside. The air was heavier here, thick with old wood, old money, and older silence. Every step on the polished marble echoed a little too loud. A house that big shouldn't feel so claustrophobic. "Please," she gestured toward the sitting room, "let's talk in private." Private meant under the chandelier, with the antique mirror reflecting everything. My father was already there, standing by the fireplace like a statue that had lost its meaning. His drink wasn't even touched. Typical. Corinne sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, legs crossed, one perfectly polished heel bouncing like a metronome. She hadn't changed out of the gold silk she wore at the gala. It was a message, one I understood all too well. "Alara," she smiled, voice high and false. "So glad you came. Really?" I returned the smile with one of my own. Tight. Controlled. "You always did love a performance," I said, just loud enough for the room to hear. Her foot stopped bouncing. Before anyone could speak, Corinne reached into a folder beside her and slid a paper across the table toward me. "Just a small clarification for the Foundation's records," she said lightly. "We're restructuring. We'd appreciate your signature." I didn't touch it. I just looked. Legal jargon. A transfer of rights. A quiet erasure of my name from anything related to Silas's estate. It was done up neat, with witnesses pre-listed, ready for the final flourish, mine. I glanced up. Her eyes met mine, daring me. I smiled instead. "Of course," I said casually, "but I'll need to have someone review it first." Her expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough. I watched her jaw tense before she caught herself and leaned back. "No problem," she said too quickly. "Take your time." My gaze flicked to my father. He looked down into his glass like it might contain answers. My mother busied herself adjusting a vase of lilies that didn't need adjusting. They were losing their grip, and they knew it. "I'd like to pay my respects to great-grandfather's study before I go," I said, rising slowly. That got their attention. My mother hesitated. "That room's been sealed since the funeral. There's nothing." "I won't be long." I grabbed my purse, felt the familiar weight of the iron key inside. It had been with me since Thatcher slipped it into my hand, but now, under the light of the chandelier, it seemed to hum with a quiet urgency. I turned toward the staircase. Behind me, Corinne's voice dropped low, almost a hiss. "Follow her! Don't let her open that door." She didn't think I heard. But I did, and I smiled. Then I walked up the staircase, each step heavier than the last. The key in my purse clinked softly with every move, as if reminding me why I was here. The air upstairs was cooler, untouched by the performance happening below. The scent of furniture polish and age clung to everything. The hallway lights flickered slightly, or maybe my nerves made them seem that way. Silas's study sat at the very end of the hall. The door was darker than the others, its brass handle dulled by years of disuse. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. To the faint hum of the estate's heating, the distant echo of voices downstairs, and my own heartbeat thrumming in my ears. I reached into my bag, wrapped my fingers around the iron key, and slid it into the lock. It resisted at first, like it was unsure if I still belonged here. Then it gave a reluctant click. The door creaked open. The smell of cedar, paper, and something faintly sweet, pipe tobacco maybe, hit me all at once. My throat tightened. It was like stepping into a memory I didn't know I still had. The room was almost perfectly preserved. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin golden lines, painting stripes across the bookshelves. Dust motes drifted lazily through the light, shimmering like secrets suspended in midair. "Hi, Silas," I whispered. "It's been a while." The walls were covered with shelves from floor to ceiling, ledgers, family records, books bound in cracked leather. Every surface told a story of precision, everything meticulously ordered, deliberate, controlled. Except for one thing, a single photo frame on the desk, turned face down. I crossed the room slowly, my fingertips brushing the desk as I passed. The wood was cool, smooth, familiar. My pulse kicked harder as I flipped the frame upright. Beneath it sat a small cassette recorder. My breath caught. A piece of masking tape on it read, in fading ink, "For the one who listens." I hesitated for a long moment before pressing play. A faint click, then the hiss of old tape, and then his voice. "If you're hearing this," Silas said, his tone calm but tired, "they've already tried to erase you." My knees almost gave out. "But I left proof," he continued, "not of wealth, of betrayal." He spoke names, dates, bank transfers, all of it. He detailed how the foundation's money, his life's work, had been siphoned off, laundered through shell accounts under Corinne's name and my parents'. He spoke of false charity reports, rigged audits, and legal bribes dressed as donations. My hands shook so badly I had to set the recorder down. Silas had known, he'd seen it coming, and he'd tried to protect me. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, not because of greed or vindication, but because for once, I wasn't crazy. For years, they told me I was the ungrateful one, the disappointment, the emotional one who twisted facts to make herself feel important. But he'd known the truth all along. I closed my eyes, pressing my palms against the desk to steady myself. The recorder kept playing. "Legacy isn't what you leave," Silas's voice said softly. "It's what you refuse to let die. If you're the one listening, then maybe, just maybe, there's still hope for this name." Then silence. For a second, I forgot to breathe. The quiet didn't last. The doorknob rattled. I froze. The recorder was still on the desk. I snatched it up, stopped the tape, and shoved it under my jacket just as the door swung open. Martin stood there, the family's attorney. Mid-50s, slick hair, pressed suit, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Your family's worried about you," he said, his tone smooth but insincere. I turned to face him. "You mean they're worried about what I might find?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You shouldn't be up here. Some things are better left untouched." I shrugged lightly. "And yet, you followed me anyway." He smiled, but there was tension in it. "Be careful, Alara. People who dig too deep tend to disappear from the family picture." My jaw tightened. I took a slow step closer, my voice even. "Funny thing about that, you can't erase someone who already stopped playing by the family rules." His expression faltered. For a second, just a second, he looked almost afraid. Then he straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and left without another word. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled shakily. I looked around the study once more, searching for anything else that might matter. That's when I noticed it. A photo on the far wall, half hidden behind a bookshelf. It was me, maybe 10 years old, standing beside Silas. His hand rested on my shoulder. We were both smiling. Someone had taken a knife, or maybe a pen, and scratched my face out. I traced the mark with my thumb. "Guess it's time they see me again," I murmured. I slipped the recorder into my bag, made sure it was secure, and walked out of the room as quietly as I'd entered. Every step down that hallway felt lighter, like each one carried me further from who they thought I was. By the time I reached my car, the sun had started to dip low behind the trees. The mansion looked smaller from the outside, less powerful, almost sad. I started the engine, drove through the gates, and didn't look back. Halfway down the road, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. You're in danger. Meet me at Whitlock Harbor at midnight. Bring the tape. I stared at the screen, gripping the wheel tighter. The sun was gone now. The sky hung in gray and gold threads over the water in the distance. I didn't know who sent the message. I didn't know if it was a trap. But I did know one thing. Silas left me the truth. And I wasn't done listening. By the time I pulled into Whitlock Harbor, the sky had turned into a heavy curtain of dark blue. Midnight had settled like a warning. I parked beneath the glow of a crooked streetlight, its orange bulb humming weakly above the waterline. Wind pushed against the docked boats, making them creak and groan like they were tired of keeping secrets. I sat in the car for a few seconds, gripping the steering wheel. The cassette recorder was tucked inside my coat, close to my chest. My phone rested in the center console, Thatcher's number still open. No calls, no messages. He was supposed to have my back. And yet, silence. The air outside was colder than it had been all day. Moisture clung to everything, my hair, my sleeves, my fear. I walked slowly across the gravel path toward the edge of the dock, each step grinding the tension deeper into my chest. This place was quiet in the way cemeteries were. Too quiet. I stood at the water's edge and looked out. The lights across the bay flickered in the reflection, soft and broken. They reminded me of myself a few months ago, blurred, dim, hard to focus on. Not anymore. My fingers brushed the recorder in my coat pocket. It was still warm from my body heat, like it remembered what it carried. I heard footsteps, fast ones. I turned sharply, my nerves braced, my breath shallow. Then I saw him, Thatcher. His coat was unbuttoned, hair tousled, tie missing. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since we last spoke. "You came," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. He nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows behind me. "I had to." He didn't greet me with pleasantries. "No, sorry, I didn't call. Just urgency." "They know," he said, "about the tape, about Silas, everything." I didn't blink. "How?" "Martin's been at the Foundation's office since sunset, shredding files, burning records. They're trying to wipe every trace Silas left behind." I crossed my arms. "Let them burn paper. This tape is all I need." "That's not all," he added, lowering his voice. "Your parents, they're working on having you declared mentally unfit. If you try to go public, they'll paint you as unstable. Say the stress of the inheritance made you delusional." I exhaled slowly, grounding myself. They tried to erase me alive. Now they'll try on paper. Behind us, the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the air. Headlights flared across the dock, sweeping over our faces. Another car. I stepped back instinctively. The driver's door opened. Out stepped Corinne, flawless in black. Behind her were two men. Foundation security. Thatcher looked at me, then back at them. "I didn't tell anyone." Corinne smirked, arms crossed. "Of course you didn't. You were followed." Her heels clicked against the wood as she walked closer. "You always were predictable, little sister." I didn't flinch. She nodded to one of the men. "She has it. Take it." The security guards moved forward, slowly, not aggressively, yet. I reached into my coat pocket, drew out the cassette recorder. "You want this?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Corinne's smile widened. "Finally, you're being reasonable." I took one more step toward the edge of the dock. The water below was still and black. Then I tossed the recorder. It spun through the air and disappeared beneath the surface with a soft splash. Corinne screamed, "You idiot! That was your only proof!" I stared at her, expression blank. Then I let my mouth curve into the slightest smile. "No," I said. "That was your copy." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "I uploaded it," I replied calmly. "It's already scheduled. Every major paper in the state will have it by dawn. For the first time, her face dropped. You always did underestimate me, I added, stepping back. Corinne lunged, hand reaching for my wrist, but Thatcher stepped between us, blocking her path. You'll regret this, she hissed over his shoulder. I leaned close enough for only her to hear. You already do. Security advanced again, this time faster. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. My shoes hit the dock hard, breath tight in my chest as I reached my car, flung the door open, and shoved the key into the ignition. Thatcher's voice rang out behind me. Go! I didn't need to be told twice. The tires screamed against the gravel as I sped off. Headlights pierced the darkness ahead, the harbor growing smaller in my rearview mirror. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. I glanced at it. Upload complete. A surge of something, relief, power, rushed through me. Then another buzz. New message. Unknown number. They know where you live. The blood drained from my face. I tightened my grip on the wheel. No more hiding. By the time I reached my apartment, dawn was just beginning to tease the edges of the sky. But the hallway leading to my door felt unnaturally still. I parked across the street, watched for movement. Nothing. Just the hum of a distant garbage truck and the clink of metal from someone's early coffee run. Then I saw it, my front door. It was cracked open, that was all I needed. I crossed quickly, heart steady now, not pounding. No panic, just a quiet, searing awareness. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Drawers had been yanked out and tossed onto the floor. My couch cushions were gutted, books scattered across the carpet like fallen soldiers. The photo of me and Silas, smashed. The glass in tiny pieces on the tile. My laptop, gone. The small safe I kept in the bedroom closet, forced open, contents missing. Whoever had been here knew exactly what to look for. Almost. Because on my kitchen table, untouched in the middle of all the chaos, was Silas's letter, still folded, still there. I walked over, picked it up carefully, and sat down in the only chair still standing. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded the page and read the line I'd memorized days ago. When they laugh, stay silent. Truth will speak for you. It wasn't just a phrase. It was instruction. It was prophecy. I pulled out my phone. Notifications were pouring in like rain. The email had sent. I tapped open a news alert from the Charleston Tribune. Whitlock Foundation under federal investigation for fraud. Another. Family empire built on lies. Legal heir breaks silence. Then came the texts. Friends, old co-workers, numbers I didn't recognize. Some shocked, some apologizing for not believing me sooner. I read none of them. Just saw the subject lines. You were right. I'm sorry. Are you okay? I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I leaned back into the chair and let out a slow, controlled breath. You finally heard me, didn't you, Silas? I whispered. Took long enough? The apartment felt cavernous with all that silence. Then, just as the quiet began to settle, 3 sharp knocks cut through it. I stood, not startled, just ready. I opened the door. Lowell Whitlock stood on the other side. My father, disheveled, eyes red-rimmed, hair flattened like he'd been pulling at it. For a man who'd always prided himself on appearance, this version of him looked broken. You destroyed us, he said. No hello, no apology, just accusation. I stepped back and let the door hang open, giving him the space he didn't deserve. No, I said evenly. You did that when you forgot who we were supposed to be. His shoulders sagged, hands dangling uselessly by his sides. You could have kept quiet. We would have taken care of you. I blinked slowly. That's all I ever did. Keep quiet. He moved to step inside. I didn't stop him. He glanced around the wreckage, maybe to see what they missed, or maybe to check if I still had anything left worth breaking. His eyes landed on the table. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the embroidered napkin beside the letter. CW. The initials glared up like a stain I could never quite scrub out. He followed my gaze. "You still holding on to that old thing?" he asked bitterly. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Sirens echoed faintly outside, growing closer. Red and blue began to flicker across the windows. He heard it too. His jaw tensed. "You're no Whitlock." I met his eyes and let the words land like glass shattering on tile. "I'm the only one who is." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. I didn't watch him go. I stayed right there at the table, staring at the napkin and the letter, two parts of a story I'd finally reclaimed. The sun crept in through the blinds. Dust in the air began to shimmer. CW, those letters that once humiliated me, were fading in the light. "Goodbye, Corinne," I whispered. And just as I thought I could breathe, my phone buzzed again. One message, unknown number. "There's one more thing Silas left behind. You'll find it where the light never reached." That message stayed with me through the longest week of my life. Each day that followed felt strangely still, like time had stopped moving just long enough for the dust to settle, both inside the estate and within me. The world finally knew the truth, and yet somehow I knew my story wasn't finished. Not yet. 1 week later, as the first pink streaks of dawn crept over Charleston's skyline, I stood at the front gates of the Whitlock estate again, only this time with the keys in my hand. I took a long breath. The iron hinges creaked as I pushed the gates open. No guards, no reporters, no false smiles or cameras. Just the silence of a house that once rejected me, now waiting. The air smelled like magnolia and morning rain, familiar, almost comforting. I stepped across the gravel driveway, the sound of my footsteps no longer drowned out by laughter or judgment, just the quiet rhythm of belonging. Inside, the foyer was cold and still. No gala gowns brushing the marble, no champagne flutes clinking. Just me and the ghost of that night, the one where Corinne called me dirt beneath her feet. That echo lingered in the air, but didn't sting anymore. I wasn't that girl now. I moved through the empty halls until I reached Silas's study. I hadn't returned since the night of the recorder, but the message, it kept leading me here. I traced my fingers along the bookshelf, remembering how Silas always stood here with a book in one hand and a bourbon in the other. Something about that memory made me pause. I leaned into the shelf, feeling along the edges. And that's when I heard it. A faint click. A panel shifted. Behind it, a narrow gap, just wide enough for a person to slip through. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped into the hidden passage. The air changed immediately. Cooler, stiller, stale, untouched for decades. At the bottom of a steep set of stone steps, I found a small cellar, cloaked in shadows. In the center of the room stood a simple wooden table, and resting on it, a weathered metal box engraved with 2 letters that took my breath away. EW, my initials. With trembling hands, I unlatched it. The hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. Inside, letters, dozens of them, carefully bundled and aged with time, all addressed to me. I sat on the edge of the table and opened the top envelope. His handwriting was unmistakable. "Ilara, they see your silence as weakness. I know better. I always have." Another read, "You were never dirt. You were the soil. The one that kept everything alive when the roots turned rotten." The tears came gently. I didn't sob. I didn't collapse. I just let them fall. Steady, warm, releasing something I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Letter after letter, Silas spoke to me like no one else in my family ever had. He wrote about watching me stand tall even when they tried to break me, about how he knew he wouldn't live to fix what they'd done, but he could leave something behind. As I reached for another envelope, a thin beam of sunlight broke through a narrow window high on the cellar wall. It sliced through the darkness and landed directly on the box. The light had finally reached the place where it never had, and maybe that was the point. Near the bottom of the stack, I found a smaller envelope tucked beneath the others. Inside, a short note in Silas's hand. "The mansion is only a shell. The legacy is what you build inside it." Beneath the note, a folded deed to the estate, now legally mine, but also a key, smaller than the others, taped to the back of a business card. "The Haven," it read. Address, a gallery space downtown, under my name. That afternoon, I stood in front of the building, a simple brick exterior, nothing grand. But the sign above the door was enough to steal my breath. Haven, for those who stayed silent too long. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust danced in the golden sunlight pouring through the tall windows. The floor creaked beneath my feet. It was empty. It was perfect. This would be more than a gallery. It would be a place for people like me. The ones ignored, dismissed, erased. A space to reclaim their voices through art, through truth, through simply being seen. I placed Silas's final letter on a shelf near the front window where the morning light touched it. "They mocked my silence," I whispered, but silence was never weakness. It was the sound of something growing, waiting for light. I turned the key once more and locked the door behind me, ready to return soon, not as someone hiding, but as someone building. And now the light finally reached.